Released in March of 2015, Bought the movie is a perfect storm of fear-mongering pseudoscience that utilizes the plight and suffering of real family tragedies to push a narrative of suspicion and conspiracy. It is the intent of this video series to illustrate the glaring errors and pseudoscientific claims made by the people involved in this movie, and to expose the dangerous rhetoric that is espoused by the creators and the people that they have brought on as experts. Our entire argument comes from what some of us call dumpster diving, which is going through the VAERS database, or we'll call it VAERS database, to find any incidents of damage caused by vaccines. But the problem with this is that the VAERS database is not moderated. It's an open dump where anybody can just make a basic claim. So where did all this anti-vaccine hysteria come from? Well, on the legal side, it stems from a 1905 court case, Jacobson versus Massachusetts. And in this court case, a man tried to plead his case that he shouldn't be vaccinated based on unsubstantiated health claims. And now, because he couldn't prove any of these health claims, and because he didn't claim he had a religious exemption for it, he was fined for not getting vaccinated. This also established some very basic rules and some important rules in regards to vaccines and the legality of certain issues. For instance, if you want to work in healthcare or you want to attend public school, in many states now, you have to be vaccinated. It's just a rule. Here's lawyer Patricia Finn on parents' legal rights regarding vaccines. Now listen really closely.
Patty, if a family already has a child who suffered vaccine damage, can those parents then refuse vaccination for their next child or children and still send them to public school?
It does depend on the state. The fact that a sibling has been injured or that there may be a genetic predisposition is insufficient under certain state laws. So no, that is not a good enough reason.
And that's grossly misrepresenting. On the one side, you have Tony Bark asking a question, and it sounds perfectly reasonable. The basic idea is this: if you oppose vaccinations, then sending your child to public school can be a huge risk, especially for children who can't be vaccinated. Let me explain. Let's say you have, Martha, unvaccinated Martha. Her parents don't believe in vaccines, so she's never been vaccinated. She goes to school with Timothy. Timothy's been vaccinated, and let's say Timothy has a little brother, and he has some sort of autoimmunity deficiency disorder where he himself cannot be vaccinated. Well, if Martha gets the measles and goes to school before it's apparent that she has the measles, she can spread those germs to Timothy. The thing is, Timothy being vaccinated just means Timothy won't get sick. That doesn't mean that the virus can't literally actually get into his body for a short period of time. And then if he goes home to his brother, that's the problem. Vaccines are not a force field. They're not a force field. They're a way for your own internal immune system to be ready to battle a virus. But that doesn't mean the virus still can't get inside your body. So when Tony Bark asks,
so you're telling me that most states in this country say that you don't have a choice for a medical procedure?
Yes, that is the case.
That is a gross misrepresenting of the actual truth, making it sound like some totalitarian agenda, which just isn't fucking true.
100 years ago, there was a case called Jacobson versus Massachusetts. The courts held that under a police power, the government can force you to vaccinate.
Yeah, see, that's bullshit, because Jacobson versus Massachusetts very specifically said that they would not allow for police power to be used to force vaccinations. Instead, it makes the case that exemptions have to be given on either a religious basis or for a very real medical reason. Otherwise, you could pay a fine. But, fun trivia fact, the very first fine was $5 back in 1905. The last one that I heard about, somebody actually getting fined for not vaccinating their children and trying to push them into public school, $5. Here's the story of Mary Check.
Mary received the DPT vaccination. She was completely intoxicated. She had rashes around her mouth, around her eyes, up her back, not being able to eat, not gaining weight, not growing. My doctor recommended an antibiotic. Within 20 seconds, Mary went into anaphylactic shock. She was projectile vomiting. She had diarrhea. Her eyes rolled behind her head. She lost her color. All of this is because of the ingredients in the vaccinations.
Her doctor said she cannot get the vaccines, but the city of New York said sorry, you gotta take the shots.
You see, this one is amazing. They frame it in the movie that the state was forcing her to be vaccinated. But instead, much like we were just talking about, they were saying if she wants to go to public school, she has to be vaccinated. But it gets even better. You see, the doctor that actually gave the medical records to the court didn't say that Mary couldn't be vaccinated, only that she had health issues related to food. But wait, it gets better. Her mother, being a fervent Catholic, had a religious epiphany during one of her pregnancies, which pushed her away from modern medicine and towards holistic therapies.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Here's a quote from her. "Disease is pestilence, and pestilence is from the devil. The devil is germs and disease, which is cancer and any of those things that can take you down. But if you trust in the Lord, these things cannot come near you." As the film progresses, we have Don Lowborough.
My second child, I took him for his kindergarten shots. About 3 hours later, he woke up screaming. It was a high-pitched, shrill scream that I will never forget. He had golf ball-sized lymph nodes in his groin area, and his whole left side was swelling up. We used to have this idea that we were protecting children from infectious diseases. And we created the National Vaccine Program with the children in mind. But somewhere in time, protecting the program became more important than what's happening to our children. Yeah, I think that's good. And I don't think everybody involved is maliciously trying to damage our children with vaccines. And the basic tenet of Americans is that we have the right to raise healthy children.
Again, this is another wildly disingenuous claim, inferring that somehow your son's reaction can be applied to any child is really dishonest. It's insanely dishonest. I mean, not all children have peanut allergies, but there are children who have peanut allergies. You get what I'm saying?
I took a very nutrition-oriented approach to help him. We took him off some foods, we took him off gluten. When he stopped having those foods, he started getting speech back.
Gluten? Really? Jesus Christ. So where's all the autism and vaccine hysteria coming from? Well, for that, we can thank this giant piece of human garbage, Andrew Wakefield. Back in 1998, Andrew Wakefield published a paper saying that the MMR vaccine was related to autism. Now, despite that this is a crap paper consisting of only 12 children, it was also later found out that he faked his datasets. He fraudulently tried to push this idea, this scientific research, which was easily debunked. It was also found that he was, at the time he wrote the paper, intentionally trying to make a competing vaccine for measles. So he was financially invested to actually try and smear the name of this MMR vaccine just so he could profit from it. So the paper was pulled and Wakefield was pretty much ejected from the scientific community. Yet, for some reason, he is now regarded as some saint, or maybe even a martyr for the anti-vaccine cult. Anyway, back to the movie, we now get to the Gardasil controversy.
Before the vaccine came out, as soon as the FDA approved it, there were all these television ads telling girls to be empowered and to take this vaccine. It was primarily a vaccine against HPV disease. But it was being marketed as a vaccine against cervical cancer. Now, there's some truth in that HPV disease, over time, if untreated, can lead to cervical cancer. But there was no clinical trials up to that point that could get you there. So it was a great marketing ploy, but we really didn't know what the future of that would be.
Yeah, this is demonstrably false. Of course we had clinical trials before it was released. That's how you get a drug authorized to be released. You have to have clinical trials. And since multiple studies have been done with millions of people, all showing the same thing, Gardasil is safe, and post-vaccination, it absolutely will guarantee you from certain types of HPV infection for at least 8 years.
Major concerns about a vaccine given to many teen girls this morning. Even though it could save them from cancer, parents say that the side effects of it may not be worth it.
Since Gardasil hit the market, there's been an alarming number of serious adverse reactions and even deaths that some say are linked to the vaccine. And as more girls come forward alleging the vaccine made them sick, the more confusion and mystery there is surrounding Gardasil and its manufacturer, Merck.
See, this is the problem with shit science reporting. If it sounds catchy or edgy, they'll report on it whether it's actually true or not. You see, the problem with these reported deaths is it's more dumpster diving. It's more VAERS database digging around. And so what they found was, if a girl goes and gets the Gardasil vaccination, and say she had heart murmurs prior to that, if she then 2 weeks later has a heart attack and dies, well, that could be dumped into the VAERS database and counted as a death attributed to Gardasil. It'd be effectively the same thing if I had my morning coffee and then got in a car wreck and somebody decided to blame the coffee.
But in the initial Gardasil trials, Gardasil was given to one population and the placebo group was giving a shot of aluminum. When the results came out, they said that the Gardasil vaccine had the same number of side effects reported as in the placebo. Therefore, the vaccine is safe as placebo is nothing more than a lie, because we've used a toxic chemical instead of sterile saline or sterile water that would be completely inert.
A while back, the anti-vaccine wingnuts got on this big kick where they wanted to demonize thimerosal, which was an ingredient used in certain types of vaccines. Well, because of that type of pressure, the drug companies phased thimerosal out. They replaced it with something else. Now, because of that, and because there has to be some demon hiding in the needle, they've now pointed their focus towards aluminum. We've been using aluminum in vaccines for over 80 years now. It's used to increase the ability of antigens to provoke the right type of immune reaction. Now, the toxicity levels that they like to talk about are largely based on research showing an overt and excessive amount of aluminum exposure over a long period of time, like say working without any type of safety gear in maybe a metalsmithing operation that deals with aluminum, could somehow have after a while certain types of health effects. Now, how this massive exposure translates in any way to the itty-bitty tiny infinitesimal minor little bit of aluminum inside a vaccine, how does that relate? It doesn't. At all.
Gardasil was the worst thing we had ever seen in terms of the symptoms that were showing up. Coma, spontaneous abortion, death, of course.
Again, digging into the VAERS database to find unrelated health problems is not science. It's as real as the chupacabra.
How much money do we make by selling vaccines and implementing them to the entire world's population starting at 1 day of age and giving flu vaccines to 6-month-old babies for every year for their entire life? How much money is to be made on that? Significant amounts of money.
As opposed to the public cost of hospitalizing millions of children for preventable diseases. The idea that you can demonize a company for their product without looking at the potential cost of society not using that product is ridiculous.
The flu shot is the canary in the coal mine. They've claimed that it reduces the incidence of the flu anywhere ranging from 0 to about 60 to 70%. They just put that statement out there with no data whatsoever to back it up.
Sorry, Chestnut, you're a PE teacher, not a scientist. And yes, actually, all of the relevant data for the flu vaccine is available to the public every single year. It's researched, it's studied, it's monitored. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Sorry, Chestnut.
The Cochrane collaboration 3 separate times has looked at the flu shot, whether we're talking about babies and infants, children, middle-aged adults, or senior citizens. In all of those populations, the flu shot is no more effective of keeping you from getting the flu than as if I gave you a shot of sterile water.
That's funny. You can go to Cochrane's website and read their conclusions. Shockingly, it doesn't match up with Tenpenny's claims.
Okay, so we're looking at fetal deaths from women who had been pregnant and received the influenza vaccine.
Yes, in the early years, there was low vaccine coverage. Only mothers that were high risk were vaccinated, and there are very low reports shown here. When we get to 2009, 2010, this was the pandemic year.
I've already talked about how interconnected Gary S. Goldman is with the anti-vaccine crowd, and how there's a huge conflict of interest where he himself stands to profit from this hysteria. But just to touch on this one more time, the data that was used to make that graph, this spooky graph, it only looked at data from 1 year. It collected data from all over the world for this 1 year compared to just the US reported for the other years. As well, it included deaths from SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. Now, how exactly you can have a chart and you're talking about fetal deaths and then you talk about SIDS? That doesn't make any sense. SIDS only affects children that were born. Fetal means they're still inside the mother. Besides of which, there's absolutely no research whatsoever pointing vaccines towards SIDS, and there's even some studies that show possibly being vaccinated reduces your chance of SIDS. But hey, look at the graph. Theirs again. Bravo, Goldman. More dumpster diving.
It's a sign of intelligence to question status quo. You know, I mean, it's really not a sign of being wacky, it's a sign of intelligence.
I think this is one of those times where you kind of lean back on your motherly instinct. My instincts told me, question this, look into it, read, research, and then what you find will lead you to the truth.
Not to put this too bluntly, but if your research involves going to lunatic pseudoscience, anti-vaccine websites which peddle homeopathy and holistic cures, it's not going to lead you to the truth. Far from it. Instead, it will lead you to only one thing, and that's dead children.
Starch or corn oil. There's something that seems kind of sneaky about manufacturing food and engineering it and marketing to us, and for some reason or other they don't want to tell us what's in it. I know that if you buy, a shirt or a pair of pants, it has to say that it's, 90% cotton and 10% lycra. So I want to know what's in my food if I know what's in my pants.